We certainly are living in uncertain times. Talk to a lot of people out there, whether they're employees in a large company, entrepreneurs, leaders in companies, and no one knows what to expect. We have a very timely topic this episode. We're going to talk about doubling down on certainty during uncertain times. Welcome to the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, where we cover the issues that help owners scale their small business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire Solutions, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is Simone Janssen, and she is the founder of Bulletproof Business Growth and AI Business Scaling Blueprint. She helps small business owners scale to 7 and 8 figures by building high-performance teams so that her clients can get out of the weeds and focus on being CEOs. Some interesting points about Simone. This AI blueprint is a very cool business growth AI stack, and it helps owners do things in minutes that used to take weeks or months. She helps owners implement instead of creating, so they can get to having faster results rather than working on putting the plan in place. And she's a nomad by heart and by profession. She loves to travel, and we were just talking about her place in Asheville. Matt, let's bring on Simone.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey. Thank you so much. I'm great. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Awesome. Where are you sitting today?
Today, I'm sitting in Folly Beach, South Carolina, which it's always beautiful here. So
is it get humid?
It will be. Right now, it's that perfect time in spring where it's just the perfect weather, 70s and 80s, and it's not humid yet. So
in Texas, that's about 10 days in the spring and 10 days in the fall, where everyone's like, oh, this is perfect. If it could just stay like this, and then it goes up to like 85.
Yeah, well, we're in the same boat pretty much.
Yeah, very cool. So, hey, we're talking today about such a cool and timely topic, because you and I had talked, way back when we scheduled this, and no one knew what was going to happen. But we're talking about doubling down on certainty and uncertain times. And we always like to kind of start with some definitions or parameters. And so what I want to understand from you is when we say that statement, right? How do you double down on certainty in uncertain times? What does that mean to you? Let's put some parameters around the conversation today.
Yeah, of course. Well, as business owners, it's easy, not easy for us, because we know what's going on in our heads. We know what we're thinking with everything that's going on the outside. We have our own thoughts about what we're going to do about that. So even if it's crazy what's going on, and even if we're uncertain about it, but in our minds, we're building some sort of strategy around this. But what gets incredibly important to have high-performing, functioning team is that certainty gets passed on, that information, that thought process gets passed on to all of the people who are working with you. And it's really tough. As an entrepreneur, a lot of times that's just not the first thing on your mind, is communicating what's going on in my head, right?
Sure. But anybody's pretty fast and furious.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the entrepreneur's mind is pretty fast and furious. We have to pivot quickly, change quickly, come up with solutions quickly, all those things. And the bigger we get, the more people we have with us, the more that communication is so badly needed. And especially when the world is really upside down and nobody, everybody's hearing about tariffs, what's going to happen with that and this and that. I mean, small business world is pretty disrupted right now. So everybody's hearing, no matter what side of the fence is on, you're hearing all sorts of news. Everybody is thinking it's a big mess pretty much. And so how do you keep your team engaged and focused on the right stuff at the right time? So no matter what's happening, you can be nimble and make the moves you need to make, and not be kind of the one who's left holding the bag because you're the only person who knows what's going on. So That's my parameter.
That's very cool. So give us an idea in terms of the businesses you work with. We always say we try to deal with business owners $5 to $25 million a year. So that could be anywhere from, 6 employees to 100 employees. Is that kind of in your wheelhouse as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our clients are anywhere between 1 million and 100 million. So that's a very wide
And it's
window.
still all considered small business, right?
It's
I think
still,
small business is up to like 200 million or 250 million or
yeah,
something.
maybe I think 200 is the official term, right? But smaller teams, I mean, most of our clients are not going to have 100 people, but we're somewhere in the 10 to 20 employees who are, some of them are experts, some of them are generalists, but in general, what always becomes true is like the more everybody understands the 5C in business, right? And when I talk about the 5C is they have the clarity, as in they know the big picture, they have the context, they know what the strategies are. You have good communication, so all of that goes all around. And then of course we spread certainty by doing all that because
Okay.
everybody knows what it is, and then we have consistency in implementing what we do. So that little framework there brings a lot of certainty to the table because now everybody, even if the outside is uncertain, we still know, hey, what are we focused on? What's important now? What's everybody's responsibility? What's everybody accountable for? And what's the outcome we're driving?
That's very cool. So it almost sounds like we're going to be focused on what we need to do, and we're going to block out the outside noise and do what we know we need to do, or we've all agreed we're going to do.
Yeah, and even if there are changes needed, that's where, communication is so important, and having the context is, if we as a team meet weekly and we look at what are the priorities, then we can shift quickly when it's needed. If everybody is all over the place and in a siloed situation, then we can't really make any moves. And the more uncertain the outside, the more organized and the more on the same page we need to be on the inside.
Right. And
So
I think you just gave me a great lead into some of the mistakes, because you talked about the organization and not being siloed. And so, maybe walk us through in terms of, um, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a kind of an alignment and a communication issue is really what we're talking about at a high level. Is that
yeah.
accurate?
Yeah, and starting all with leadership, right? Because as a business owner, you are dependent on your people
Yeah.
doing stuff for you, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's how we drive results. So if there's no good leadership, then everybody is, even if you have a great team of people who have the best intentions, but they're not going to be very aligned, and so that means they're not going to be driving the best possible results for you. So, what I see a lot, and you were asking about, what are some common mistakes? Well, for a lot of our clients, leadership is one of those things that they hope to get to when, right? Like, and there's all sorts of reasons and excuses for why it hasn't happened yet. And generally it's everybody has too much on their plate. They're struggling to make payroll, getting that next customer on the books. Like, everybody has all these seemingly more important things to do, and they're hoping everybody else will just figure out what needs to happen.
Right.
So it's this kind of this nice to have leadership and operational systems in place that help everybody else do the best job possible. And then the bigger you get, the more that falls apart. It's kind of like, if you have like 3 to 5 employees, you can sort of micromanage the hell out of them because they're all right there and it's easy. But by the time you have 10, 15, 20, that gets really chaotic and crazy. So if you don't have good systems in place,
Right.
well, everybody feels, and this is the part where certainty becomes so important, because everybody knows when they're not doing the greatest job. So if you're spinning your wheels hard and you're trying to do all sorts of things, but it's not leading to anything, then that leads to a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
So
And that's kind of like just a bunch of people doing busy work. They're doing what they think they should be doing, but
exactly,
it's not
leading to anything.
multiplying or impacting the work of the other people.
Yep. Yep. And especially when we are in uncertain times, for you as the leader, it is your job to bring certainty into
Right.
the workplace. And, I saw that especially prevalent during COVID. Like that was like a monster example moment for that, because for a lot of companies, that's when everything fell apart. And then there were those few where things were just like booming and going like really, really well.
Right.
And aside from, depending on what industry they're in, that's certainly a factor, but it was also the leaders who had a clear picture. They had a clear vision of how they were going to get through this time. They communicated that with their staff, with their team, and they set clear parameters for what needed to happen and when, and had accountability around it. So they built a lot of certainty in that place. So it was easy for people to come to work and show up and be engaged, because it felt much better than being on the outside where everything was so chaotic and nobody knew what was happening.
Right.
So it's in your very, very best interest as a leader, as a business owner, to build this place of certainty that has clear parameters, because then you actually have people show up and be engaged and want to be there because it feels good. And that's, as humans, that's our first interest, is like, how am I going to feel good?
Yeah, that's true. So we want to make sure this leader is coming in and creating a clear vision for what we should be doing. That's going to create certainty. Now, I'd be interested to understand your take for these leaders, as we're trying to push this through. Sometimes in these small companies, these leaders are maybe reaching the limits of their capacity and ability as a leader, because, as I've said a million times, when people start a small business, they hire their neighbor, they hire their neighbor's cousin, they hire their friend, and everyone pitches in and does a great job. But then eventually, that if they do a great job or a good job, that business will outgrow the experience of the people, some of the people who started it. Some will rise to it and continue to be innovative and learn and whatever that is. And some people will start to struggle. And so is there, in your model, is there provisions for the people that might start to struggle?
It's a great question, Corey. And you and I, when we first talked, we had this whole conversation about, what do you, when you get to that place where it seems like you have these people who used to do well for you, and then suddenly they're starting to falter. And in your mind, it's suddenly, right? But because you've been missing the signs, because most likely,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Most likely you haven't really been in a place where they had really clear KPIs that they were delivering on. They had accountability, they had ownership, and there was follow-up and actually the communication around their performance that would indicate to you and to them sooner than later that there's suddenly a skill gap happening, right? So because the business is outgrowing them. So when we kind of go back to the idea of the 5 C's, one thing that I've really noticed is like, especially our overwhelmed, like the general typical overwhelmed business owner who hasn't been doing all the things because they have been too busy doing other things, right, that seem more important. Well, suddenly they're going, oh, we have all these people on the team who are not really providing value, who are not, kicking it out of the park for us. Right. So what do we do? And what I found is that there's a really clear litmus test that happens when you as a leader come in and you provide that clarity, right? You give them a clear vision. You give them clear action plans. You have clear communication with them. You give them feedback. They get the support they need. You'll very quickly see who will rise to the occasion and go, now I finally know what you're looking for. And they start to perform. And then there's the other side that go, either they can't or they won't, because it's just not the right place for them anymore. Right. And it's both, right? It's like if the company is truly outgrowing them and their skill set is suddenly it's not right anymore, it's not good enough anymore, you can move them to a different seat if their ego will allow for that. You're correct. And it's a tough one to do. And you and I have talked about that before. Yeah. Or it's time for them to go somewhere else where they can make more of an impact.
Yeah. Either way, it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard decision. But I wanted to go back then to, what are some mistakes then? Because this really feels like, as a leader, it's a common theme that small business owners, there are important things that need to be done in the business, but because they're trying to do so many different roles and take on so much responsibility, that they do push things off. I don't have time for that. The two biggest small business owner excuses: I don't have time for that, and I don't have the money for that.
Right.
So when you talk about your 5 C's, which I think are great, what are some mistakes then maybe we'll come at this from the business owner's perspective, because this podcast is for business owners. What are some of the common mistakes you've seen the owners make when they're trying to create that certainty?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm not sure if that's really, a mistake, but the way I look at it is like, for one thing, it's a mindset issue where leadership and operational clarity it's not a nice to have, it's a must have, because there's no growing without having that in place. Because what I see over and over is that, the bigger you get, the more you push, the harder you run, the more time you put in, the more you burn out. But it's this vicious repeating cycle because you're not changing the fundamental aspects of it, right? The structure, the foundation is not there. So you're pedaling harder and harder and harder, but it's not yielding better results. So it's this, and nobody likes to hear this, but sometimes you need to slow down to speed up.
We've heard this before. Okay. Yeah. And I call that, when your only input is time, work longer and harder. When that's your only input, that should be an indication there's got to be a better way. Something we got to break something and rebuild it to build in more efficiency or something like that. Sorry, I cut you off. I just wanted to hear myself. I just wanted to hear myself talk there for a second.
And you said a good thing. And I mean, and at some point, to kind of come back to what you're saying, is at some point there is no working longer or harder because you're at the edge of your capacity, right? So there's and that's where you're hoping that your team will jump in and alleviate that and do an amazing job. But if you haven't been giving them the certainty, the clarity, the consistency, the communication, all this stuff, they can't have the best intentions. They can be incredible people, but you haven't given them what they need so that they can actually do the job for you.
Yeah.
So, I've been for years, I was really banging my head against the wall trying to figure this thing out, because we have incredible strategies that we help our clients with. Like anybody who actually takes everything that we use and implements it, they're experiencing phenomenal results in their business. But the biggest problem always was they wouldn't get to implementing it, right? They'd be like, oh, I know this is great. I know this is what I need, but I don't have time to do it.
Right. It sounds like another task I need to accomplish.
Yes.
On my endless.
I'm already exhausted.
Yeah.
Right. All that stuff. I can't think. I can't sit there and write a vision. This is past my capacity at 7:00 at night or whatever it is. So I started thinking at some point, what can we do to at least give people that first bit of space that they need to actually take a big breath and go, okay, I can actually become the CEO of my business. I can actually put myself into a strategic seat because now I have the support that I need because all these people on my team are actually delivering. So we developed an AI tech stack that actually helps people do all this stuff that normally takes hours, days, weeks, and they can get it done very quickly. And it's actually fun and it's super creative and it allows people to kind of think outside the box and get some answers for things that they haven't even dared to ask.
Right.
So they can just sit down and go, all right, so my time management is completely screwed up.
Right.
I'm always tired. I never get to strategic things. How do I actually take my schedule apart, make sure that I do the most strategic things at a time when my brain is actually awake? And so I actually have a productive day. That's number one, right? When you do that, you can immediately save 5 to 10 hours a week of just
busy work,
right? Doing stuff that you're doing $15 an hour work when your business is not getting your $2,000 an hour input, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and
so
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it sounds like if you're not organized, if you don't have a clear vision, then it's hard to communicate down to your leaders what it is. And years ago, I told my wife, I said, I want to come up with an expression that means when help is not help. And what I mean by that is, if you ever said, oh, I really need this, and someone goes, let me do it for you, then you wait for it. And when you get it back, not only do you have to unwind it, you have to redo it. And it takes twice the amount of time to fix what they did than it would have if you just did it yourself, right? And so, a total aside, years ago, I used to watch Jimmy Fallon. I don't watch Jimmy Fallon anymore, but he had a whole thing and he came up with this tune called Ushi, which means no, thank you. And like someone says, well, oh, I can help you. And you're like, Ushi, Ushi. And he stole my whole thing because that's exactly what I was trying to come up with. Like, when help is not help, right? Like, oh, I'll help you. I'll help you organize this, whatever. And then you're like, what is happening here? What's going on, right? So you got me thinking about that when you don't have a clear vision, and then you have a leadership team who's super well-intentioned. They want to help and they jump into help, but their help isn't help. Yeah. It's just stuff.
And so, part of that for everybody is to understand, what's everybody's sweet spot? Where can they actually help, right? Where can they make the biggest input? Where can they deliver the greatest value, right? That's always like my question for everybody at the beginning of the day is like, where can I deliver the highest value today for the business? If everybody asked themselves that, and they asked themselves that as a group, we'd have a really good day, because then we could actually get to a place where you don't have to say Ushi, because I'm exactly focused on my sweet spot and this is going great. And everybody else on the team is doing the same thing, because we're all perfectly clear about what the priorities are, what we need to deliver, and who's responsible.
Right.
And that's kind of the second thing that I see go really awry in a lot of business, where there's no clear accountability structure. So, and when you ask people to come up with that, which should be pretty simple, oh my God, it opens all sorts of cans of worms, because suddenly people are like, well, I don't know who's actually responsible, who's accountable for the whole problem. I don't know who should be consulted, who should be informed. I have no idea.
Right.
So when you give
start
people
kicking the can too, because they're like, oh, I don't. Or you have people that are like, well, I want to be responsible for that. And as a leader, you might be thinking, oh, I don't think you're the right person to own that.
Well, and a lot of times it's the nobody, anybody, somebody, something problem, because nobody actually knows who's responsible. Everybody thinks it's somebody else, and then it doesn't get done, right? Or it doesn't get done by it gets done by the wrong person. And you're like, oh my God, what kind of mess do I have on my hands now? But helping our clients create really clear accountability structures that are like minutes to make has been a huge eye opener for a lot of people, because they suddenly go, oh, I can do this for every project. I can do this for every business areas. Now I only have one person to shoot, right? And that's always where we want to get to, where it's like, give me one person to shoot. Everybody else has their own area of responsibility, but there's only one person who's accountable. So giving that, again, when we go back to certainty, right? Like really understanding where your sweet spot is, where you can create the highest impact, what you're accountable for, what you're delivering, what your KPIs are, that all that stuff is so important. And then, you're asking like in terms of what are some mistakes that business owners are making. I think a lot of times, going back to what you and I just talked about, it's not hiring up soon enough. So always kind of waiting for somebody to get better, when if we had done all the audits and if we had asked all the questions, we'd already know this person can't get better. Yeah, either really they won't or they can't.
Yeah, they're struggling. And
they're struggling. You're not doing them a favor by keeping them in the role that they're in.
Yeah. And often these are long-term relationships. And so you're not doing your relationships outside. How many times have you heard like it cost me a friendship?
Yeah, for sure. Or a family member, right? That's what I've seen. A lot of our clients have family business. They're like, as my brother, I can't fire him. I'm like, well, anytime you're in a family business, you always should say, don't hire who you want, who can't fire, right? Don't ever do that. But
Oh,
Go
sorry, I
ahead.
cut you off again. I keep cutting you off. I
No,
had another
that's fine.
thought though. So when you were talking about the accountability chart, um, what are your thoughts on? You might look at someone and say, "Man, they're really good," and I used to think they fit here, but now that we've got things rolling, I've really seen them excel in a different area of the business and kind of moving people around and kind of finding the right roles for people.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important thing to do all the time, honestly, because to me, Jim Collins said it a long time ago, like get the right people on the bus, make sure they help you figure out where the bus is going, and then move people in their seats and keep doing that until everybody is in their perfect seat. And of
Right.
course, that changes over time. And it depends on the size of the business and the maturity of the business a little bit, because if you're hired on as the expert in a certain area, that's kind of where you expect to be.
Mm-hmm.
And expectations the root of all conflict is if suddenly somebody tells you you're supposed to go somewhere else, you might not be that happy about it. But for a lot of smaller businesses, you hire somebody and like you said, you might have hired them over here, but suddenly you're seeing all these great skill sets that are emerging over there. So
Right.
of course we want to keep moving them into their sweet spot. And generally when somebody's really good at something, they also like doing it. So
I agree. Yeah.
it would, in terms of that ego blow, that doesn't come in that situation. People would be like,
Yeah,
oh, cool.
for
There's an
sure.
opportunity
Yeah.
for
And then
sure.
what in terms of setting, you talked about setting KPIs and being able to measure performance. Do you have any kind of, let's not get into any advice right now, but mistakes when people are like, okay, I'm going to try to set some clarity and I'm going to try to put some, what I think are measurable KPIs or parameters around someone's performance, because maybe I see they're not doing as good a job as they used to, and it could come from I want to help them, or it could come from well, I'm going to find out for real if they can really do this job or not. But
Mm.
what kind of mistakes have you seen around people setting up ways to assess someone's performance if they need some help, or if they're struggling, or if they're in the wrong seat?
That's a great question. And to me, it always starts with number one is actually, do they have role clarity, right? It's like, do we have a really clear role definition? And with that role definition also comes the outcomes that they're responsible for. And some of that may be the KPIs. Not everything is measurable, right?
Right.
So what comes with that a lot is like, especially when you're moving somebody around or when you're trying to assess somebody, they need a really clear framework for what that means. And they also need really good feedback. So, a lot of times when you're really trying to push somebody who's not performing, like, the old idea is give them a performance plan, which if it's done correctly and not done to just basically get somebody out the door, it gives people.
Get the paperwork in place, right?
Yeah, exactly. If it's not getting the paperwork in place, if it's really the intention is help somebody to improve their performance, then we have a small number, right? Like 1 to 3 things that you're asking people to improve, and you're giving them the resources and the coaching that they need to actually improve performance.
Right.
So in that situation, I think what gets really, really overlooked and oftentimes what the business owner doesn't do is that communication and that consistency piece. Because when you're asking somebody to perform differently, rather if it's in a different area or if it's improved performance, they need feedback. They need to understand, hey, am I doing better? Am I hitting the right numbers? Yeah. Is this, what you want to see?
Yeah.
And a lot of times business owners do this thing where it's like, hey, this is what I want, but then there's no weekly meeting, there's no check-in, there's no feedback, there's nothing. So this poor person doesn't really know,
Right.
Am I getting better? And then suddenly, either they get fired or somebody will go, hey, doing a good job. And they're like, okay, cool.
Or someone will say, hey, you're doing a good job. And then the next week they get fired by someone else who
or
doesn't
that,
doing a good job.
or that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very important that is follow up for follow through.
Right.
Right. So we need to communicate about it, and people need to know, am I hitting it so I can do more of it?
Right. 2 things. I don't want to miss the thoughts, but going way back, you called it a job expectation. Is that what you called it?
Role
You
definition, job expectation,
job definition is what you said.
role
Thank
definition.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Instead of
Mhm.
saying job description. Job descriptions are often just a wish list. I'm so not a fan. So job definition is great. And you talked about having communication, and I would assume if you have the right KPIs, that someone who is maybe they were struggling because there was no clarity and they're taking a bit of a hit in their confidence, and you set up the KPIs so they know. It could be easy. Let's use a silly example. I'm an inside salesperson and one of my KPIs is 20 outbound calls a day. I can measure that every day myself and know I'm doing it and
Yeah.
know that, hey, I'm meeting the expectation, or heck, I made 25 calls. I exceeded expectation. So I have to assume if you set the KPIs up correctly, and as an employee, I know I can measure myself and I know you're measuring me daily too, and I'm always meeting or exceeding those KPIs, is that a form of communication?
And a very basic level, right? It's like, okay, cool. We know we're both hitting the numbers, but that's not what keeps people going, what gets them excited. So the next step for the business owner would be to go, okay, so you hit the 25 outgoing calls. How many sales did you make? Or how many meaningful conversations did you have, right? So to take it a level further, because now you've given this person this expectation, they're actually hitting it. So it's in your own best interest to go, all right, so how are we improving the outcome?
Right. And I guess the genesis of my question was, if you set up KPIs that both of you can see, you and I both know business owners very well. Sometimes they take the they can see the results. Why? I don't need to tell them they're doing a good job. They can see it for themselves, right? And that was kind of why I was asking the question, because I wasn't sure what your answer was going to be, but my gut was telling me that, having a transparent KPI that someone can see if they're doing their job or not, hitting their numbers, shouldn't be confused with leadership and going and continuing to say, hey, that's great. You hit the call number. Your sales numbers are good, but I notice your conversion rate is a little lower than it, or let's work on your conversion rate. What's working, what isn't, and kind of continuing to develop that person.
Yeah. And you know what? That person might be hitting their numbers, but their customer service sucks and they have no repeat customers, right? So this is in the next conversion we have to measure.
Right.
So numbers are awesome, but and it's funny, I've heard this from a lot of our clients where they go, I just don't really, I don't want to blow, smoke up people's skirts. I don't want to have to be constantly going, good job. They shouldn't need this, right? I'm like, well, maybe they don't need it, but pretty much for humans, it's like everybody likes to hear when they do a good job, because that means they're going to do more of it. Don't you want them to do more of it? So tell them they're doing a great job. It's in your best interest.
Well, and I talk about that all the time about, kind of understanding your employees and as individuals in terms of what motivates them, especially like when you craft an offer to bring someone in. What's important to you might not be important to me. So we're agile in a small business, and we don't have these silos and pay ranges and all that. We can be way more creative to get the people we want. And so understanding your people, and heck, just asking them, saying, hey, what do you need from me to make you feel like you're doing a great job and keep you motivated? Some people might say, yeah, don't bug me. Let me stay in the closet with the door closed. I don't want to talk to people. Like, just let me do my job, right? And if you're not talking to me, that tells me I'm doing a good job. That would be a rare case. But some people might say, yeah, pat on the back or take me to lunch, or I don't know. But it's, if you ask someone, if you treat everyone the same, you run that, in my experience is you run that risk of he does that with everyone.
And plus people have just completely, it's that, what's it called? The 5 love languages or something. Yeah, it's like everybody has something else they value. Right?
Yeah, gifts or praise, or, stay away from the touch, right? We're at work.
Yeah,
We don't
that
want to
might
be
be a good
touching
idea.
anyone.
No, but there was a really interesting research project. I think it was Stanford that did it. That they took 200 people and they measured like what would people be most excited about in terms of feeling valued. Like, and the three choices were more money, I think more vacation, or pizza with the boss.
Okay, I'm going to guess which one came in last. Money.
I think money was second.
Okay. What was pizza with the boss? Where did it rate?
Number one.
I was going to guess. I was going to say it was
Yep.
pizza, PTO, money. But yeah, but PTO and money, right? You value if you're a I don't want to. If you're a young single person with no family ties or whatever, give me the money. If I'm married with kids at home, give me the extra time so I can hang out with my family, right? So
Yep.
that's a wash. But yeah, being able to, like I said, boss, hey, you're doing a great job today. I want to take you for lunch. Let's go. What are we going to talk about? Anything but work. I want to know who you are and what makes you tick outside of work, right? Like that stuff's invaluable. But again, it's time. Do I have the 90 minutes it's going to take this person? But it's probably a great 90 minutes invested.
Yeah. But all of everything we're talking about basically comes down to leadership and giving people certainty. So no matter what you do, right? Understanding them, giving them parameters, building the right culture, whatever it is, it's building a container that people like to be in. And that is your business.
Very cool. Give me the 5 C's again.
It's the first one is clarity, as in big picture, and context, which is like, the pieces that belong into that. It's all the moving pieces. Then we have certainty, as in pile it on and let people know that it's all working. Communication and consistency.
Love it. It's a great framework. So let's move into some advice. So other than calling you right now, Simone, we'll get to you in a second here, but other than calling you, if you had 3 to 5 pieces of advice you could offer someone to build that certainty into their business, we always like to say this is a first bite of the elephant, right? Like, what are those walk to run steps that they could take to kind of build certainty into their business?
It's a great question. And it's kind of everything should happen tomorrow at the same time, which it won't, right? So the first thing that really I think is very, very helpful for people is to just recognize that you have to spend some time planning. People need a plan.
Right.
Because that's, you are a leader because you are giving people direction. So they need a plan.
Right.
So, and for most people, the step number one is have a good short-term plan that helps everybody understand, what's this project that we're working on, or the next quarter, what are the goals and expectations, right? So building a short-term plan that—
How complex does this plan need to be? Like napkin, like cocktail napkin, or Excel spreadsheet, or somewhere in between?
You can do a really good plan on one page. It can be a one-pager.
Okay.
Right? So, and we teach a plan that's more of a holistic plan that always has 6 elements to it. And you can use it for any length of time, but to get focused, and that's really what we're talking about, to get you and your team focused on the most important priorities. Well, for some companies, that's a quarter. They can look at a quarter and go, all right, that'll totally turn around. Things turn around in if we can just really get focused on this quarter. Or for some people, that's like, hey, let's make sure we have this next week. Right. So having a vision for that amount of time, bringing the values in that everybody brings to the table, because, hey, if nobody's focused, maybe focus is a really important value. So we can actually do that. And then knowing what we're measuring, right? Knowing what our methods are, like what are we doing and how are we measuring what we're doing? What opportunities do we have? And what obstacles could we be running into? So looking at those 6 elements in every plan could make a very short, focused plan that gives everybody the opportunity to really create some impact.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question for you. I create my plan. How do I roll it out?
Great question, because now you created this plan, say, for the company. So now you need to sit down with your individual leaders and talk to them about what that means to them. So,
Okay.
because especially the first time you do this, if your team has never participated in strategic planning, they have no idea what you're saying. So you can help them understand, hey, this is the company plan. Now, this is what I expect you to drive. These are the aspects of the plan, right, that you will own. And these are the high level methods I expect you to use. And these are the high level outcomes I expect you to have. Right.
So
So,
it sounds to me like it's a conversation, not an email to
nope.
send to the leadership team.
That could be like later on, this could be something you're not even involved in, but the first few times you do this,
Right.
until everybody understands what that means, this is definitely when you, depending on the size of your team, you meet with, and again, as a business owner, you should only be meeting with your direct leaders, and then they do that for their teams and so on. So it's kind of that cascade effect. But you're not doing this with all 50 people. You're doing this with, your 6 directors or whatever you got.
Yeah. Your people at
And
the table, right? Yeah.
exactly. So that they understand what they're doing, and they have to be able to do the same thing with their team.
Total aside, have you found that one of the hardest habits for a small business owner to break is exactly that, just going to their leaders and letting the message trickle down without kind of going around and talking to everyone to...
Well, yeah, you can skip everybody and just have the direct conversations, and then everybody is really confused about who's responsible for what.
And then more people are knocking on your door because they're like, oh, I could just go right to you and get this information. That's great.
Yes,
It's
great idea if you want to work nonstop and have everybody really
yeah.
confused.
And look, I don't mean to put a knock on small business owners, because when you start, that's what you do. But that's as an evolution from kind of a mom and pop shop where everyone's doing everything to elevate up into that leadership role. The word that I always use is trust. You have to have people you can trust. Without trust, you can't have the message cascade and come back up and down, right? And do all that. But that was just because you were talking about how to roll out these things. And I just,
and having a clear chain of command is very practical for having actual clear ownership. And, like you mentioned this earlier, for all of our listeners who in their mind, they're like, oh my God, I know I should delegate this, but it'll be so much faster if I just do it myself.
yeah.
Sure, it will be, but that also means you're always doing it yourself. So
Yeah.
it depends on what you want to do, right?
It's faster in that moment, but it's slowing you down over the long term, because no matter what's going on, you got to go back and do it.
100%.
Like you said, it's $15 work, $15 an hour work, and it's something you should be pushing on.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been great conversation, lots of valuable information. If there are people out there and they're listening or thinking, man, that's Simone's sharp, I would love to talk to her and learn more about her platform and her coaching, how can we get in touch with you?
Well, like I kind of alluded to earlier, we just rolled out this brand new, really cool AI platform that I love, where people can really take a lot of the things that we were talking about today, as in, they can look at time management, they can look at delegation responsibilities, they can look at hiring, they can look at CEO behaviors, and have AI do it for them. So it's a really cool tool. We're super excited about it. We've gotten great results with it. So go to AIbusinessscalingblueprint.com right there on the screen and check out what we have there. From there, you can definitely get a hold of me through, you can book a call with me from there directly if that's what you want to do. But this will give everybody a really good idea what's possible to implement in your business in terms of leadership and operational strategies and structures in a really short amount of time. And it's actually fun to do. So
very cool. And Matt, what else do we have? Do we have a LinkedIn profile? If people want to connect with Simone, there you go. Perfect. Cool.
Awesome.
Hey,
well, thank you.
Thanks so much. I enjoy you carving out some time to talk with us today. It's been great. The information is so good, and I know lots of people got a lot of value out of this. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And we'll connect again. Let's keep in touch.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Simone. There you go. Simone Janssen from Bulletproof Business Growth and AI Business Scaling Blueprint. awesome information. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of today's episode, you want to keep up to date on our content, make sure you subscribe or follow the YouTube channel. You can leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the show. Let us know what you thought of Simone. Give us some ideas of topics you'd like us to cover. We're here to help you. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your favorite platform is. Just search up the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Corey Harlock. And until next time, stop grinding, start growing.